Hi, thanks for being here today. My name is Ellen Young. I'm the Assistant Director of Mizzou MADE Career and Professional Development at the Mizzou Alumni Association, and we're excited to be here today with our guest speaker to talk about all things business and how to manage your revenue and find those wins. Before we get started today, I want to share a little bit about the Mizzou MADE Business Network. The Business Network is an initiative that the Alumni Association launched last year to promote alumni-owned businesses, connect alumni entrepreneurs, and support business owners through networking and educational opportunities like the one we have today. We have over 175 businesses in our business network now from 17 states and even one internationally. You can learn more about the business network, whether you're a business owner yourself and want to list your business in our directory, or if you're an alumni or a friend and want to support other Mizzou-owned businesses. With that, I'm happy to introduce our speaker today. We have with us John Seifer. And John has been a business owner for all of his adult life. His most unusual and lucrative company was one he ran while living 1,500 miles away, before the internet made that a pretty common occurrence. In 1995, he helped found the International Coaching Federation and is a past president of the ICF. He is also a past president of the Angel Investor Forum. John is the author of Output Thinking, Scale Faster, Manage Better, Transform Your Company, and currently coaches owners of growing companies nationwide. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're so glad to be here with you today and just to learn from your knowledge and hear everything you have to share with us. So I'll let you take the stage and you're welcome to share your screen.
All right. Thank you much. Okay, if you are here for this topic, first of all, I want to say thanks to Ellen and to the Mizzou Alumni Business Owners for having me. I've actually changed the colors of my presentation to the Mizzou gold and black because I live in Pittsburgh and we're a gold and black town as well. So it's exciting to be here. If you came here for this webinar, Why Revenue is a Terrible Way to Measure a Company, the good news is it's not here. Why? Because I've changed the topic. I've changed the name to make it a little more exciting, I think, and a little more pertinent. How to score your company and win. And the first question you should always be asking is, who is this guy and why should I listen to him? Ellen did a really good job of telling you who I am and a little bit of my background. So I'm going to skip over some of that. Serial entrepreneur, she mentioned. I was also a part of the founding mentioned group of the International Coach Federation. I leave this slide here because I have a free coaching session for anybody that wants it. You can click on this link and schedule a time. My book, Output Thinking, I'll give you a little teaser of the book later on today, but if you want to go ahead and buy that, there's a link for that one. And I cover the biggest reason for frustration that I've seen with business owners in that book. So that's what that's about. And my newest venture is called the Operator Accelerator. And that's a 6-month program that combines education and coaching and tools to make people who run small to medium-sized businesses better at operating their companies. So back to our regularly scheduled program, how to score your company and win. And when I say score your company, most people think of revenue because they think, well, is this $1 million company, $100 million company, $1 billion company? And revenue is really the easiest way to measure a company, but in many ways, it's not the best. And we'll get into why that is, but the bigger problem is we are so used to thinking of ourselves with a single number. And why is that? I tend to blame schools and sports because if you go to school, you get a single grade. You get a test, you get a grade. They don't say, well, here's what you did really well and here's what you didn't do so well. I actually heard of a school, I think it's in DC, that instead of giving people a failing grade when they fail, they get one that says not yet, which I think is kind of cool for education. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's unlikely that you got A pluses in all of your report cards in school. Entrepreneurs tend to not be those kinds of people. And that's okay, because there are so many ways to succeed in life that there's so many more ways in life than there are in school. But anyway, we were conditioned to look at this one grade. The other thing is sports. Whatever sport you follow, there's dozens of of specs that stats that people track for different players and different teams and whatever. But really, the only one we're conditioned to think about is who won. And so we're used to saying there's one number that we use to compare ourselves to everybody else. And we look at that number and we say, how am I doing? Is mine bigger? And maybe that's a male thing. Do females ask, are mine bigger? I don't know. I don't even want to know the answer to that. But the result is that we focus on revenue. And it seems to be the right answer. There's a single number. It's easy to compute. It's easy to compare, but it's misleading. And I want to share with you a little example of why. I'm working with several companies right now, but two of them, I want to compare the revenue. One of them has an $8 million revenue. It's an industrial distribution company, and they had 400,000 in profit last year. It's a 5% profit margin. It's not terrible, not great, but not terrible. The other one had 3.3 million in revenue, but a 1.2 million in profit. Now, that's very different if you just look at the revenue, but if you look at the profit, you get a completely different number. And secondly, if you look at the valuation of those companies, the one with 400,000 in profit is actually more valuable than the one with 1.2 million. Why is that? They're in different businesses, different business models, and the one with 400K has more tangible assets and less owner dependency. So depending on what you want from this company, if you wanted to sell the company, you might want to own the one on the left. If you wanted to run the company and profit from being involved in it, you might want to have the one on the right, which is why revenue is not really the best way to score your company. So if we shouldn't use revenue and we shouldn't compare our companies to each other based on that one number, then what should we use and how should we compare? Well, to get the answer to that, we need to ask the genie. And what I mean by this is, think of your business as a genie that was giving you not just 3 wishes, but maybe unlimited wishes. But if your business was a genie, what would you ask it for? Another way to say that is, what do you want from your business? You're running this business at this time in your life for very specific reasons, whether you've articulated them or not. What do you want it to give you? And I ask my clients this all the time. I've found 3 things that are pretty universal. One is everybody wants profit. This is not revenue. This is profit, money that you can actually take away out of the business to serve your life. They also want time. Usually they want time off. Often I hear clients say, God, I haven't had a vacation in years, or I can't get a day off these days. They want a schedule that works for them and for their life. And we also want work that we love. These are the 3 universal things that I've heard from business owners, what they want from their companies. But I've also found about 20 different other things that are not so universal. Some people want to build a community. Some people run their companies because they have a mission in mind. Some people want their companies to launch them into another phase of their life. Businesses have launched people into politics, into philanthropy, into running more and more different kinds of businesses. Lots of different things that people want from their companies. But if you don't ask them, you'll never be able to grow your company in a way that gives you what you want. But this is something that we all want. We want to work. I call this your superpower. What do you excel at? What do you truly enjoy? And what adds the highest value? Wouldn't you love to spend your time doing this at work? Warren Buffett, I think it's his autobiography or his biography, it's called Tap Dancing to Work, because he just loves the work that he does. Wouldn't you love to be able to spend most of your time in your superpower? I imagine you get to do some of that, But often people say, well, I can't do the work that I love all the time because I have to do this other stuff that I really don't like, but it needs to get done. And because of that, I don't have time to grow the company or even take time off, or I don't have time or money to hire people to take the pressure off. And so you end up with your company feeling like it's a ball and chain. And that's because your company has needs that are independent from you and your needs. It's kind of like your kids in that respect. Um, your kids have needs. You may want to be taking a Sunday afternoon off, but it's time to take them to soccer practice or run them out to the restaurant because they're hungry or whatever it is. Um, and business is like that. So I wanted to look at what does your company actually need, and then we can say, okay, how do I get those needs met for the company in a way that I can operate my superpower? Well, the first thing a company needs to do is make something. It needs to make something that people want to buy. And then you have to find those people and sell to them so that you now have a customer. If you don't have customers, even if you have a really good product, you really don't have a company. You may have a charity, you may have a wonderful hobby, great product, but if you don't have customers, if you don't find them and sell to them, then it's really not a business. Then you need to do some things that I call support activities. And these are the things that focus on supporting the making and the selling so that you can do them over and over and over again. And that involves hiring people, managing people, tracking the money so that the money goes, not only does it go to the right places, but that you can learn the insight that that money holds. So your financial analysis is really important. You need to get information throughout the organization. It's not just enough to have it in your head. If it's just in your head, you're like what I call grandma in the kitchen with no recipe, but makes great food. Thanksgiving dinners are wonderful. Birthday celebrations are terrific. But there's no way that you can scale a restaurant with just grandmas. You have to get that information out. And then there's another group of things called CAFE, which stands for compliance, administrative support, facilities, and et cetera. These are things that if you don't pay attention to them, they can actually bite you in the butt and become a problem. If you do pay attention to them, they don't really move you forward, but you need to make sure that you're not falling back. And then if you do all these things properly, then you can do the fourth thing, which is grow. You can scale your company. And if you do this well, then your company contributes profit that you can then take out of the company. And so your job as the owner or as the CEO of the company is to run all these different things. These buckets that I have in here, the green, the red, the blue, the yellow, those are the things that your company needs from you, hopefully to give you profit and some of the other things that you want from it. And the good news is about owning what I call an SMB, a small to medium business, is that you can get more than just money. These are the things we talked about before. You get a lifestyle that you like. You get time off. You get to do things that are your superpower. I own Google. Now, very small part of Google, but the only thing I can get from Google, if I'm lucky, and if the stock market cooperates, is some money. I can't get the lifestyle, the enjoyment, the control, the fun stuff that I've had from running my businesses. But as a small business owner, you can. The problem that happens, and the reason that it sometimes feels like that ball and chain, is that your company may be the wrong size. And what I mean by that is it may be too big as well as it could be too small. We often don't realize that our companies might be too big to give us what we want. But it's true. And the reason is you can get into this middle ground where the company needs more stuff done, but you don't have the revenue or the profit to hire enough people to do all those things. And that's where sometimes I recommend people scale their company back. What I've seen happen as companies grow is that they reach certain stages, what I call stages of company growth. And this is a chart that I made up, and you probably can't read it all here, but I'll read some of it to you. When you have a stage one company, that company is really focused on the owner. And basically, what that means is the owner is doing the work of making and selling. That's those two buckets that I showed you before, the green and the red. If you have employees and you're a stage one company, the employees are at the direction of you, the owner, and they're helping you do that, but they're not doing it on their own. They're not taking that responsibility. So the time that you spend in your company is mostly interacting directly with customers. Your people are directed by you. So if you're not there to direct them, they don't do as well as they could. The energy can vary quite a bit from an adrenaline rush or disappointment, or even despair when cash is tight. In a stage one company, the accounting is typically almost like your checkbook, like you would at home. If there's money left at the end of the month, hey, great, we can go out to eat tonight, honey. That's a little different than more complex financing. There's not much planning in a stage one company. And when you're not there, when the owners aren't present, things tend to go haywire. That's what's been called you owning a job, not a company, because so much of it depends on you. Usually companies of that size don't have much of an outside advisory force. They may have a CPA, but they think of that person as somebody who costs them money rather than an investment in money. And that person usually just does their taxes. They may also have a payroll firm if they want, but they don't usually have any advisors beyond that. And sales happens when you put effort into it. But then if you get so tied up in making or fulfilling those sales, you let the marketing or you let the sales slide for a while. And then you run out of fulfillment to do, and you're back to ground zero. Now you have to ramp up the whole marketing and sales thing again. And at the low end, companies in the stage one, they can generally provide a lifestyle. They can fund your lifestyle. In some cases, the owners work for free, and if you total up the time you spend over the course of a year, you may not even be making minimum wage in some cases. At the high end, compensation for a company like that can be, $100,000 to $200,000. It can be a nice lifestyle, but there's not very much wealth built into the company. The company is really dependent on the owner, and so if you wanted to sell that company, it's not worth that much beyond you. Now, if you move into a stage two company, it's a very different kind of thing. For one thing, you now at that level have people who are responsible for the making and the selling, which used to be the owner's, really the owner's responsibility. Now you've got other people who not only can work at making and selling, but they can actually take responsibility for it. And the owner's time is now focused internally. Instead of focusing externally on the customers, they're spending time internally with managers and with employees. And so your people are not just employees, but you have managers, and there are processes in place to support the people's best work. That's a very different mindset. And a lot of companies, a lot of business owners don't want to make that jump, which is fine. This is your company. You can do with it what you like. As I've explained this concept to some of my clients, I've had clients say, I really am a stage one company and I love working with my customers. I don't want to move into a stage two company. And that's fine. My advice to people at that level is be really good at what you do. And by good, I mean define quality the way your customers define quality. Be good at that and then charge high rates, not exorbitant rates, but you should be charging at the high end of the market. Because if you do good work, everybody wants good work, but only some people are happy to pay for good work. If you do good work, you can charge, and you can only work for those people that love to pay for good work. And so that adds to, again, more profit, but also more enjoyment. In a stage two company, the energy is more stable because not everything is going up and down at the same time. There is regular accounting. So it's not just working on your checkbook, but it's understanding what the balance sheet looks like, where more financing loans and that kind of thing comes into play. And accounting reports are used to manage not just how much cash you have, but get managerial insights. Which customers are the most profitable, which are not, which products are more profitable, that kind of thing. And it's not just used for taxes. Your planning tends to be further out than just a stage one company. Often you're looking at the next quarter, the next month, whereas in a stage one company, sometimes you're just planning to get to the end of the next project. You can get away, if you own a stage two company, you can usually get away for personal or business reasons because you've got other people in charge of running things on a day-to-day basis. You tend to have more outside advisors for companies like that. You might have a coach, you might have a lawyer, you might have an advisory board, or you have a CFO, not just an accountant, but somebody who helps you, give you insights that come from the accounting. Sales happen constantly, and they're treated like a process rather than just by a one-off or something that you really put a lot of effort into. It happens continually because that effort is being applied continually by people who often are not involved in fulfilling those sales so that they can put full time into marketing and sales. And the compensation for a stage two company can be much more lucrative than the compensation of a stage one company. There can be salary and profits, and sometimes this can be up into the millions. A lot of times, some of those profits are reinvested in the company, and that can provide wealth within the company itself, although sometimes you do take the profits out. That means if you go to sell a company, that it's worth more because it's not so dependent on you as the owner. The next phase of a company can be what I call stage three. And at this point, the company is more than just a revenue generating organization. It's actually becoming a regional, or in some cases, a national priority of that industry. So you're building an organization and a brand as the business owner. That's what you focus on. You're not necessarily building the organization internally like you were in stage two, and you're certainly not just focused on individual customers like you were in stage one, but you're looking out maybe to acquire other companies in your industry and things like that. Your time is mostly spent outside the company, but not focused on customers. This time it's industry focused. You're working with industry leaders. You may be doing joint ventures with other partners, etc. And as far as people in your organization, you have directors. Some of them have profit and loss responsibilities for different departments or different aspects of your organization. And so it's really a business built on other businesses. The energy in a stage three company is very much like a stage two company. It's more consistent, but not everybody's feeling the same way at the same time because the organization is now so big that other people are going in different directions at different times. And the accounting is much more sophisticated. There are sophisticated financing options that are available. They can be used for growth internally and also for external acquisitions of other companies, or for sales, for spinning off different parts of your organization that way. Planning in a stage three company is critical. You often plan 3 to 5 years out, sometimes more depending on your industry. I used to live in Connecticut, and we were close to a company called Pratt & Whitney that makes jet engines. It turns out that when they build a new model of a jet engine, they have to do a 50-year business plan because they know that their engines are going to be available and going to be working for 50 years. And so they have to have plans to have parts available and service and all that kind of stuff. Most companies don't plan that far in advance. But planning is much more critical in a stage three company and much more long-reaching. It's no problem to take time away if you're the owner or at the CEO level of a stage 3 company, because people are there to run more aspects of the business than there are in a stage 2 or certainly a stage 1. And in fact, you often have to take time away for business reasons. These are the kinds of companies that where you can, while you're running the company, you can also be involved in other things. You have many outside advisors, and often these are, besides the coach, lawyers, accountants, and CFOs that you had as a stage 2 company, you can have industry-specific consultants, people that you can hire to come in to do a project that you don't have the in-house resources for. And then you have full sales teams, and you often at that point have a VP of sales, or what's called a CRO, a Chief Revenue Officer, somebody who's responsible for the strategic aspect of marketing and sales and how to pull those two together. Compensation in a stage 3 company is much higher than in either of the other two companies. And often you can earn a lot, but you typically get a really good salary, but a lot of your earnings are in the form of equity and ownership of the company. And a lot of the profits and the cash flow is put back into building that company even bigger or acquiring other companies, so that your wealth in the equity side of things tends to grow even faster. And that's why these companies are the most valuable in terms of wealth when you sell, because it almost can be imperceptible in the immediate when you sell a company that's a stage 3 company. The customers don't always know, the vendors don't always know, because the people that they're operating and they're interacting with are very different. And so they're not the owner. So that's how your company can grow. And if you know what you want from your company, this is how you can decide, where do you want that company to be? Do you want to stay as a stage 1? Do you want to move to a stage 2? Can you grow into a stage 3? And by looking at the company this way, you're looking really at more than just revenue. And so you can develop internal scores of what are the things that are important to you and build your company that way. And that's how you can win. So I just wanted to mention the book that I wrote is about the focus. The most frustrating part that I've seen of any company is working with employees. And the Output Thinking book is about how to deal with employees better, so that you can scale faster, so that you can manage better, and ultimately transform the company into giving you what you want, not just making the revenue bigger. Next time I speak to this organization, it'll be in June, and I'll be speaking about the book. If you've read it before then, I'll answer any questions you have from it. If you haven't, I'll also summarize it and be talking about how you can apply some of the lessons from this book. But in closing out, I want to give you a tip, and then I'll open the floor for any questions that you have. But I want to give you a tip from the Output Thinking book, and that is, the most important job of a manager, if you manage people, your most important job is to describe the outputs that you expect from those people that you hired. You hired them for a reason. And that reason is you hired them to produce something. That's what I call outputs. It's results. But often when we do that, we have assumptions about what those results should look like. And we don't always specify those assumptions in enough detail, because we kind of assume that everybody should do this. Well, when you find yourself thinking, I would have expected that this would happen, or I would have assumed that this would happen, or I shouldn't have to explain this to people, that's a key in your mind that you should probably explain it in a lot more detail. You should say, here's what I want from you as an employee, and here's when I want it, and here's how many of it I want, and here's the quality that I want. Here's how I will differentiate a great job from a merely good job. And one way to think about that is to think about, there's a children's fairy tale called The Shoemaker and the Elves. And this shoemaker was putting together, he was down, his business wasn't doing very well. He was down to one piece of leather. He was going to make one pair of shoes, and he cut out the leather and laid it on his bench. He was going to put the shoes together in the morning, and he went to sleep. And while he was asleep, the elves came in, these magic elves that are in every little fairy tale, and they put together these shoes. They did such a great job that it turns out he was able to sell those shoes for twice as much money and started turning his whole business around. But before he woke up, the elves disappeared. And he woke up and he saw, what did he see? Instead of pieces of leather that he had laid out the night before, he saw fully put together pair of shoes. And he said, oh, the elves have been here. So here's my exercise for you when you're frustrated with your employees. Think about if your employees were really good, but they were elves, and they came in the middle of the night while you were asleep, and they did a really good job, and then they went away, and you came in the next morning, what would you see to indicate that they did a good job? That's the description, that what you would see. That's the output that you want from them. One of the reasons we don't express those outputs in detail, there's two reasons really. One is that we just kind of don't even know what they are. We just assume that we know what it would be. The other reason is we don't want to be a micromanager. We hate those guys. Well, the truth is, if something is important, which means if it matters to the customer, then it's not micromanaging to explain it at that level. And there are some times with some people that you just have to explain it over and over and over again. And when you do, they do a good job, at least temporarily. So it's worth your time as a manager to describe those outputs in detail. So that's a little teaser from the book, and I hope to be talking with you about it next time. So, Ellen, I'll turn it back to you. We can open the floor for any questions or comments that people have, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, John. I want to leave this slide up because I know we've chatted. I read your book over Christmas break, and I'm so glad you ended with that anecdote of the fairy tale, because I thought the content of your book was just so digestible because it did have some of those anecdotes, and it's not necessarily a space I find myself in, but I still found myself relating to the content. So I'll give it another plug as a wonderful opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, anybody, even if you're not a business owner, if you manage people, then the elf story is a really good one. And what I consider management is getting work done through other people, because as any organization grows, there's more work to be done than one person can do. And not everybody has the same skill set. So you want to be able to bring in people who are really good at certain aspects of the job.
Definitely. There is one question, and it refers back to earlier in kind of probably in the first half of your content about knowing when to scale up or when to scale down. And from your coaching perspective, from wearing the coach hat, what is that like to have that conversation where the right option is to scale down? And how does someone navigate that without feeling like, oh, this is a failure or this is not what I was expecting?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it goes back to the idea that we tend to look at revenue as the right score. And we think, well, if I scale down, then that means I didn't reach my revenue numbers and I'm failing. And that's not true at all. The right way to score is, are you getting what you want from the company? If the company is in that too big, but not quite big enough situation, the symptoms of that are you are chronically pressed for time. You're chronically doing too much and not getting enough from it. But you don't have the resources to hire more people to where you can pull back and work a normal work week. What you can do at that point is scale back and just say, I can't take on so many customers. One way to do that, like I said before, if you're in a stage one company, if you're good, is you can raise your prices. And what'll happen is some people won't buy from you anymore. But the ones that do will be happy, and you can actually make more profit by scaling back at a higher price. So I'll give you a really absurd example, but you'll see the idea is if you, and this is pushing the envelope, but if you were to double your price, let's say you sell your restaurant, you have you sell roast beef sandwiches. If you double the price and half the people said, oh, that's too much, I'm not going there anymore, you would actually get the same amount of revenue, because now you're only selling half as much, but it's twice as much money, but you would have less cost. And so you would have more profit. Now, obviously, most companies can't just double their price, but you can increase it maybe by 10%. And if people don't want to buy at that price, then the ones that do want to buy, as long as you're within the ballpark of what the market will pay, you'll be more profitable. And so that's one way to scale back, is to limit, to increase your price. The other is just to say, look, this is the time that I'm working, or this is how many customers I can take on, or what your schedule is like. I had in the last house that I lived in, we were doing a kitchen renovation. And so I called a guy who was very well recommended. And he said, I'm a very small company. I work with one crew. He was a stage one company, top of the market. And he said, I don't want to expand beyond one crew because I can't control quality, which that's fine. And he said, so I won't be able to get to your job for 6 months. And I said, okay, thank you very much. I don't want to wait that long. I'll find somebody else. And I did find somebody else, and the other person was great. So that's another way to scale back, is to just say, I'm not available. You don't want to promise things that you can't deliver. So I really appreciated the fact that he was promising something, and it wasn't what I wanted, and that was fine. Fine for him and fine for me.
And that really kind of echoes back to what you mentioned about when you're managing employees and setting those expectations. He set that expectation of, here's my timeline, and it didn't work, so you both had to move on. But
Exactly.
I know some of our business network members are one-person shops, small businesses, and they build their book of business, and it gets to that point where, okay, we're good, we don't need any more, unless you have a churn and you're dropping or removing and then adding again. So I just think all of your information was so helpful and pertinent to our group today. And like you said, you'll be back with us. And well, gosh, tomorrow's May 1st. So just in less than 2 months. And we'll be able to chat more about the book and have any other follow-up questions then.
Thank you. And I would appreciate if anybody wants to ask me any questions, they can email me, john@ceobootcamp.com. Or if you want a copy of that chart that I had up a few minutes ago about the stages of your company, I'd be happy to send that out as well.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, we can send that out to our business network members and our participants today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, John. We'll see you again soon. And to our participants, we'll see you next month for more content. Have a great day.
Take care.